Well, it's been a few days, maybe even it's been over a week now, since Russia formally annexed these four new oblasts in eastern and southern Ukraine: Zaporozhye, Kherson, uh, Donetsk, and Luhansk. I think I'm pronouncing those at least somewhat close to what they're supposed to be. In addition to Crimea, that will make five former Ukrainian oblasts, which have ascended to the Russian Federation, as they put it. And despite all that, the Russkies have not really gone into shock and awe mode. Now, there's two explanations for this. One, which is the West's explanation: the Russkies are incompetent, their military is extremely weak, they're spent, they have no more resources, they can't produce enough weapons, they lose so many tanks in every battle to Ukraine that they just can't keep up with production and trying to make new ones to replace them. Their soldiers are going to go into this winter without boots and without proper winter coats because the Russians they didn't know they were not prepared for the harsh Ukrainian winter. And these conscript soldiers are so incompetent that they are just total cannon fodder, and the superior Ukrainian armed forces are just marching through every town that they contest. That is the Western explanation for what we have going on. The official Russian explanation is that everything's going fine according to plan, and the, I guess, hawkish explanation within Russia, people who are on the hawkish side of Russian politics, they are criticizing the Russian government and the military leadership for essentially botching this campaign. And I have to say, as time goes on, if things don't change within the next month, I would have to start. I think I would agree with them. Now, I'm not a military expert, so I can't, judge specific tactics and things like that on a battlefield level. It's not something that I'm going to put the time in to really try. I'm not going to be trying to become an armchair general. There's other things that interest me. I'll leave that up to other people. But I can judge results. I can look at how much time has gone by, what's going on, and generally gauge whether the Russkies are putting in a good effort. Now, for what it's worth, I think that the Western explanation of the Russians are just incapable of producing military hardware and their army is small and on the brink of collapse, I just don't find that to be reasonable. Russia was a world power for at least a century. If Russia's always, only ever had one thing, it's been human resources. It's been cannon fodder. It's been plenty of soldiers to throw, into a meat grinder. And in Soviet times, they had a great military-industrial complex. I don't know if using that term is really accurate. I mean, that's what we call it here in America. But Russia had a pretty significant state-owned arms industry, as you might imagine. They were focused on the Cold War, and most of those factories are still around, and they're still pumping out guns and bombs and tanks and whatnot. So I don't think that the Russians have run out of military resources. I don't think they've run out of men, and I don't think that they've run out of weapons. I mean, yes, I get that the mobilization takes time, and maybe I am just finally getting a little impatient. But the Russkies should have had a lot more troops a long time ago. Why would they hold back? If you're going to, that's one thing that you can say about the U.S. military, is that when they go in to invade a country, they level it. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a great thing to do. I don't think that turning Iraq into a sheet of glass really helped much of anyone. But the one thing it did accomplish was dethroning the incumbent government. And here in Ukraine, Russia claims that is their goal. They want to overthrow the Kiev regime or at least push the Kiev regime out of these areas of eastern Ukraine. And the way you do that most effectively, I think most people would agree, is shock and awe, overwhelming force. I mean, if you have the manpower and you have the weapons, why not use them? Why is it that Russian troops have to be moved around from place to place to take on the Ukrainians, in different towns? Russia has plenty of soldiers. Russia was off conducting war games with China and whatnot, like in Kazakhstan a few weeks ago, before these referenda were held. And, that looked quite bad for them, because they had all these soldiers over here doing absolutely nothing, jerking off, basically, for cameras, while there's a war going on. Now, at the end of the day, I don't feel passionate about either side in this conflict, which is why I think I can be somewhat objective about all this. I have no real emotional stake in either the defeat of Ukraine or the defeat of Russia. But I can understand that people within Russia might be growing rather annoyed with the state of play. Because Ukraine should be a speed bump for the Russian military. No matter how many weapons NATO throws at Ukraine, the Russkies should have little trouble mopping the floor with these guys. And here we are all these months later, 6 months later, over 6 months later, 7 months maybe, and you finally get this partial mobilization. I mean, why did they not do this a long time ago? For a few months, I was following this, and the Russkies were making progress. They kept growing and growing. It was slow, and I can understand that. Hey, maybe as long as you're making positive progress, but it's a little slow, I can understand not using the full might of your military. But once things have bogged down a little bit, and there's not a whole lot going on, I mean, for optics' sake, at the very least, even if you yourself, in your command back at the Kremlin, you're happy with the way the war is going and you're not in any rush, the optics look better for you if you're making constant progress. So, to be clear, I don't think the Russkies are going to lose. I don't think it's really possible for them to lose. But they're not winning at the moment. Kind of like, it's kind of turning into a, like Afghanistan, Iraq situation, but for them. And they're not even fighting an insurgency. They are fighting, a normal, organized army. And they just seem to be kind of botching it. So I guess all in all, I think that the Russkies need to shit or get off the pot. That's kind of where we're at as far as this goes. I mean, yes, they've annexed these 4 oblasts, so that is a big step. But what are they doing to consolidate? On the day that this was announced, they should have launched a huge offensive to capture what territories, what parts of their newly acquired territories are not yet under their control. I mean, that to me is how you want to plan this from a PR standpoint. Putin announces these lands are Russia, and then that same day, the Russian tanks roll into the rest of these villages and towns, including, I think, the city of Zaporozhye. But alas, that hasn't really happened. The only thing that's happened is the Kerch Strait Bridge getting blown up, the bridge between Russia and Crimea, which, ironically, Russia is now connected to Crimea by land. They don't technically need the Kerch Strait Bridge anymore. All those years that it operated as the only corridor between Crimea and the rest of Russia, it was not blown up, but now they blow it up, and Russia has, a so-called land bridge. But nevertheless, I mean, you want more than one road in and out of places. I'm sure that they would still like to have that bridge up and running. Even if this were peaceful times, even if there was no war going on in those 4 other oblasts, it would be convenient to have a way to get to this other part of Russia via this bridge. I think the Russkies are claiming that they somehow reopened the bridge, and that at the very least, the railroad which is got separate spans. It's not a part of the road bridge. That is fully operational. And Putin came out today, kind of blustery, going, "Oh, well, this is an act of terror." It's like, okay, well, I mean, you're already fighting a war against the guys. Calling them terrorists, how is that anything more? How is that, any bit of an escalation? What's your response, Pooty Poot? So anyway, that's where I'm at as far as the war in Ukraine goes. I still follow it every day through the Duran guys at the very least. I get to hear what they have to say about it. But just not a lot has been going on. And it has, kind of in the non-military sphere so far, in the PR sphere and the political sphere. There's been this mobilization, which we haven't seen the fruits of yet. I guess that will take time. There's been the annexations. But it's just, the places I look, the battle lines don't seem to be moving a whole lot. It's not enough that you really notice it. And yeah, I get it. Ukraine is a big country, but Russia's a much bigger country. I mean, at this point, it's not even clear whether Russia wants to capture anything outside of these 4 oblasts. So I think that the Russkies, this war has gone through quite a bit of an identity crisis over the course of all this. And they really need to figure out and articulate and then act in some consistent way. They need to make it clear what they're doing there and what the goals are, and then they need to, allocate the proper resources and execute the mission. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.